Hello, my name is Mike. Welcome to the Wandering Minds podcast, part 2 of my brother Rick Shell and his story. Wherever you want to start, bro. Welcome. Thank you for coming back.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thank you, and hello. I was thinking about last time when I was talking, and this is all kind of just memories, throwing it out there, things that were impactful for me. And then I went back over the years and kind of thought about, just because of just developments in my life, how things kind of turned out, the directions and whatnot. There was a couple things that I wanted to bounce back to. I don't know if I really talked about that much. I always had a thing for the military when I was a kid. So I wanted to go in the Navy. I don't know why. It wasn't anything particular about ships or whatever, but just for some reason the Navy stuck out. But I mean, all my youth, I wanted to go into the Navy. Or in the military, I wanted to be a soldier. I wanted to go in the military. I didn't know anything about, real patriotism or anything like that. I just knew that, as much as a kid, can know.
Now, if I remember correctly, mom did have she was dating a guy that was in the Navy, correct?
Yep. USS Enterprise.
Okay. Yeah. So anyways, that could be, I wonder if that was some sort of influence on Navy specific.
It might've been.
Okay.
It might've been, I do know that as long back as I can remember, it was military I wanted to go into.
Yep.
So there was, anyways, I just wanted to throw that out. And, there was an episode, maybe I think I was around 12 years old. We were down in Portland at the waterfront. Now I don't remember if I mentioned this. I don't think that I did. And I don't think I was running away at that point. I think I think we lived in Portland, as a matter of fact, with Luria.
Yeah.
So it was right before we went to Seaside. But anyways, we were there. They had the ships there. They had the waterfront, kind of fair, it was a fair, and then you can go on the ships, you can walk around, things like that. Well, anyways, I'm walking around. I got lost. So I got separated from mom, and I don't remember if we were all together, if you guys were with her. I don't remember that part. I remember getting separated and literally wandering around, not being able to find her at all. And this girl approached me. She was probably a teenager. And she said that she was trying to get away from her boyfriend, and, she was just trying to get away from her boyfriend, and if I could help her. Okay, I'm a 12-year-old kid, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not thinking about this at the time. This is stuff that I'm looking back thinking, okay, But so we walk out to the very furthest part of the fair, and I'm looking around. I remember picking up a rock, thinking, okay, I'm going to have to, fight this guy. Again, I'm 12 years old. I mean, come on. But and we get to literally the edge where there wasn't that many people. The fair part of it was kind of behind us, and then this dude comes up. And then she kind of walks over to him and starts talking to him. And I'm kind of just in the background over here, not really knowing what to do. And then they kind of were just looking at me or whatever. And then it just ended. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if she said anything more to me or if they just walked off or whatever, but that was it. Right.
Do you think that was a sex trafficking thing?
Well, so, okay. Maybe. So the second part of that is, so I went back to the fair. I'm looking for my mom. Finally, I think I, must have went to the police that were there or whatever and said, look, I'm lost. I can't find my mom, blah, blah, blah. And then they put out word or whatever, and it kind of went out and was able to find her. She was there. We just got separated and, all this other stuff. Well, anyways, we're walking back to the car and some dude was following us. And I swear to God, you can ask mom if she remembers this, right? Because I remember clear as day. So there's a dude that was following us, and it was not that one guy. It was a different guy, and he was following us, and he was freaking my mom out, right? And I remember we were at the car. She was kind of freaked out, and he kind of stood, kind of back, a ways. It wasn't like really super close, but he was, he
was creeping.
He was enough that he was there, and he was making his presence known, and he was just freaking staring at us, man. And I remember just looking at him, just staring at him. And then, we took off. Now, always looking back and thinking back, if there would have been bad intent, or if there was potentially bad intent, but she felt and maybe conveyed to him that they might have a problem with me, or I don't know. I have no idea. The thing is that stuff does go on.
Yeah.
And you know, you hear about a lot of girls are involved in luring other girls.
Yeah, like traps. Yeah.
It disarms the females or the girls because there are other females, and you know, girls certainly wouldn't do anything like that. Well, yeah, she's trapped in that world too, and she is doing that. And so there's all kinds of setups and things like that. I mean, even when I was started to be approached, it was all. And I guess they would say this is kind of the whole grooming thing, you know, they're kind of feeling you out, I think. And I don't remember if it was the very, very first time, but when I ran away from that group home and it was in Portland and I was dyeing my hair black, and that dude approached me in the bathroom and just sparked up a conversation with me. Well, as soon as he found out that, because I was, you know, honest, I was so naive, and you know, when I was young, and I've always been a little naive and a little bit way too trusting. And that's always been my fault, especially when I was younger. But sparked up a conversation, and once he found out that I ran away, because I probably told him that. I don't remember details of the conversation, but I do know that once we started talking, I told him enough that conveyed that I was a runaway. And that kind of made me fair game. And then he started, you know, everything went from there, and then, you know, off doing whatever. Now, I don't know if it was this guy or if it was a different one, but, okay. So anyways, the fair thing, now it could have been something very malicious, you know, and for whatever circumstances, you know, again, you know, that, you know, intervening hand, if whatever, they kept something from going in a different direction. And I'm bringing it up because, one, that was something that did happen. Two, anything that I say is not because I'm just trying to spill my guts on my life. It would be for the lessons that I've learned, and then whatever it can get out for somebody else or whatever. Right.
Well, because that potentially somebody could have never found your body.
Well, no, absolutely.
And that's the facts.
Yeah. This is Portland, you know, so it's not like it's this massively, you know, LA or whatever, but it's a city, you know, and it has everything nearby that a city has, you know, everything. Exactly. Right. And I think, you know, I don't want to say Portland was pretty fast, you know, it's always been fast, just like Seattle. And, you know, but anyways, you know, so, but when I ran away, like I said, I got set up, I think, you know, for being able to do some of this stuff, I think just because of that first thing that happened at the Seattle Center. And it just, you know, once I learned, you know, that one, it wasn't terrible. Two, I can kind of manipulate the situation, even though I had to learn how to manipulate. And, you know, there's food, there's money, there's whatever. Right. And when you're a kid, you know, all you're going to do is run around and find other people that you're going to run around with. You're going to steal, you're going to do whatever. You're not going to do a whole lot when you're young. And so really, just like a lot of, you know, everybody, especially when they're young, but especially females, you really only have one thing. And they might not prostitute themselves, but they are in a way, because they're, you know, somebody's going to want something from them, bottom line, you know, and whether it's a guy they hook up with or whoever. And once you open the door with drugs and everything else, I mean, it's just a fact, you know, what happens with runaways. But, so the guy approached me, I, you know, sparked the conversation with him. And then one thing led to another, and I went off with them. Now I'm bringing this up because, one, how easy it was for somebody to come up and talk to somebody and open up that door. And once they find out little things about you, then they can kind of make their move if they think that it's safe. Right. And of course, for people in my situation, it was safe, right? I wasn't just somebody there with my parents watching a movie, and here comes a strange freaking dude talking to me. Now, I've always been real self-conscious myself about that sort of thing, because it happened to me so much that I'm always aware of other people and things like that, you know, just, you know, now especially. Yeah. But as a parent, people hear about that stuff all the time, you know, and they know that things are going on, but personal experience, I mean, there's people that have had things happen to them and that have literally colored everything throughout the rest of their life, you know, which makes them kind of hyper diligent over stuff. But a lot of people might not, you know, maybe know how easy it is for stuff to happen. And with kids, you know, that are disappearing, you know, and, you know, a lot of stuff that happens is, they go to parties, they get drugged. There's all kinds of situations that a person can fall into, and Bean's gangs dominate that industry right now. Not just this weirdo loner guy, right? You got organized stuff. You got organized stuff, you know, and in Portland, it's the gangs that run the freaking prostitution down there. And so if you are a runaway or somebody at the wrong place at the wrong time, it's easy to set somebody up when you just don't know what to look for, you know, or you're taught to look at a certain type of a thing, a certain type of a way, and you don't realize there's all these other things. And scammers and hustlers, they're smart. They know exactly what they're looking for and who they're going to target and how to approach that stuff. And so if you fall into that trap, happen to be somebody who falls into that trap, and, you know, and your kid disappears or whatever, you know, I mean, you could be going to college and I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, right? But when you make yourself vulnerable, and this is the problem with you know, just a lot of stuff where you don't have that, you don't have that guidance. If you're lacking something in your life, you know, especially with kids, and you're out there looking and searching, whether it's just group acceptance or whatever, you just make yourself vulnerable, you know? And so once you step outside the boundaries of where you're supposed to be safe, and that's provided by your parents and, you know, the structure of home, you know, school, stuff like that, you start stepping outside those boundaries. And even in those boundaries, it's not always safe for everybody, you know, as everybody knows, but you're more safe there. And then your parents help to protect you and guide you so that when you go out there and you know, you are on your own, you're not so naive and so vulnerable that you're just a mark, you know? But anyways,
but look, I'm going to interject because I agree with that fully. I think it's also a parent's duty to talk to their kids about this shit. Not act like it's never going to fucking happen.
Absolutely.
To them. And I think that's a big problem in this society, is because parents don't actually talk to their kids about drugs, sex, rock and roll, the fucking lifestyle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're afraid. They just, they don't know what to say, or they don't want to enable it in their minds. So they don't talk about it. It's like, well, that's fucking worse. That's like me fucking not teaching my daughters to drive before they hit the freeway.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So sorry.
No, interject anytime, please. It helps me. So a lot of younger people, you know, there's the generation thing and the generation gaps, and there's this, that, and the other. You got, you know, if a parent, I mean, you hear this stuff, you know, basically excuses, you know, that, you know, either somebody doesn't talk to somebody, or they overdo it, or they're overprotective, or they're not protective enough. I mean, it's like, where do you find that middle ground and that happy ground? You can't control what your kid is going to do, but you can control what you do and how you interact with your kid and what information you give them to kind of, you know, and I, like I said, I remember mom talking to me about sex, you know, and it's always stood out to me. She said, you know, that sex is the best, the absolute best, the most fulfilling when you're in love with that person, you know, and it just always stuck with me, you know, but, so, you know, to me, mom was somebody who would talk to me about things. And I think, you know, I was the oldest, and I was, you know, kind of wild and stuff like that, you know, and, you know, and I think she was definitely trying to do what she could to kind of
instill some morale.
Exactly. You know, and she did. I remember, again, you know, little things that are important, you know, we had to do things and chores, and then we had bedtimes and stuff like that. Now, some of that stuff started to get loosened as she's carrying on the responsibilities of a single mom, having to work, and then we're, you know, left with babysitters and stuff like that. Absolutely. Kids being what they are. But if you have conversations with your kid, and you're not just saying you're not going to do this, because they're just not going to listen. Right?
Well, they're going to do the opposite out of spite.
Absolutely. You know, but if you can communicate with them on a level that they can relate with, and you definitely try to school them and stuff like that, then it's better than not doing anything at all, or being too harsh, because, you know, you hear all the time, you know, I mean, I don't know if they're real or not, but some of them are probably real, where somebody blames their religious upbringing on why they rebelled and went in the other direction. You know, I mean, it just is what it is. But there is a lot of stuff going on. I think that probably, and you hear about it, you hear little things here and there, but I don't think there's enough emphasis on it, because I think that there's a really, really big problem with trafficking and things like that. Now, even when it's not the trafficking that people have in their head, you've got all the prostitution and things like that are going on. And in a lot of these cases, these girls, you know, maybe are willing, but they've been through the ringer to get to that point, you know, and they kind of get discarded in a lot of ways, right? And people don't even think about the guys that are involved in it, or the boys and stuff like that. And, but there's definitely issues. There's definitely problems. There's a lot of victims out there. I pray every single day for people that are in situations where they're just hoping to God that someone's going to come and rescue them, you know, and in a lot of cases, there is nobody that's going to rescue them, you know, and, but, you know, you hear things. One of my favorite pastors is a guy by the name of Peter Hammond. He's out of South Africa. He's done missionary stuff in all over the place, but especially in Eastern Europe, especially when it was back when it was communist and kind of falling apart and things like that, and in Africa. And you hear some of the stories coming out of here of just violence in general and the revolutionary stuff that's going on and things like that. But several of the topics that he covers is modern day slavery. And modern day slavery, he says, we got more slaves right now than we've ever had, and all kinds of different types of slavery.
People don't want to look at that. They don't want to believe it.
No, because it's not in their face. It's not their kid, or it's not, you got people coming across the border that disappear or go into having to work for the people that are kind of running stuff. They've got, other countries and, especially, in like China and things like that. Real stuff. And they're not all sex slaves. A lot of these guys are workers and they're working and having to work off, payments and things like that. But then you got the sex part of it. And the sex part of it is really, really bad. Right. And it's all over the place. And I know that there's agencies and people and, and stuff like that are involved, but honestly,
when you get higher powers involved with the other end of it.
Yeah.
There's nothing the good people can really do.
No. And I think personally, that just like with a lot of problems, I think that things are allowed to happen because of the effect that it has. There's, like with crime or like with a lot of things, when you have high crime societies, when you have drugs and all this other stuff, then you can reach political ends, with that stuff. And so I've always believed that, you got, good people that are within these agencies and police and things like that. And I bet you anything, if you were to have a real open conversation with them, they tell you their hands are tied like crazy on all kinds of things, I'm not in that world. I don't know. I'm just kind of assuming some stuff, but it doesn't take a real intelligent individual to look at the way things are. And you can't tell me, even when it comes to the war on drugs, that there's nothing successful about it unless the ends were basically what we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
And when you're getting,
which that's a big success.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You've ramped up the abilities of a police state to be able to take your, confiscate property, do this, that, and the other, throw low level people, in prison and give them big old sentences and doing all this stuff, just like with the sex stuff. And then the focus is never on the real big, criminal enterprises and kind of things like that. But anyways, so get back on track there. It was easy for me to be approached because things were kind of preset, that made me kind of willing to go down that road. So I wasn't forced into it. I wasn't drugged and gang raped like, a lot of people are. So I was kind of willing to go in there, but like I said, I was lacking, people to look up to. I had certain images of things that I had that image of my dad that I looked up to. I had, I had images and ideas in my head, but because I was so influenced by the music, which was, when you're older, you understand that it's not real.
Yeah.
It's not real, man. That musician he's putting on an act, these shows and stuff like that. It's not real. It doesn't represent how the reality really is. But when you're young, you don't know that. And even if maybe you're told that and you kind of know it on a certain level, no, we're all influenced by things every single day. It's how advertising makes its millions of dollars. Yeah. It's how every other commercial, a pharmacy commercial, we're influenced by this stuff that's coming at us. And when you're bombarded with these ideas and music and trends and all this other stuff, and especially when you're young and you haven't figured that out and you're wanting to fit in, you fall prey to it. Now, not everybody has catastrophes and everything else, but every single one of us are influenced by this stuff. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on what the intent is behind what those that are pushing that stuff have, right?
Well, and a perfect example of what you're literally saying is the fact that we have turned musicians, our athletes and, actors into role models.
Yes.
The fact that they're role models for us, they're making literally millions of dollars playing games, playing pretend, singing songs, and then manipulating us with their agendas.
Absolutely.
That right there tells you how subliminal shit is.
Oh, absolutely. So absolutely. And if you want to go down that road, there's books and there's lots of information on it, but just, understand a little bit how our minds work, in kind of different ways. You don't have to be super educated to know this stuff. One, you can see it going on if you just sit back and think about things. Two, people can pick up a couple books and read a few things that will hit them a little bit more.
Yeah.
The bottom line is that who is going to control what you think and how you're thinking? Are we going to look at the stuff that's going around and just kind of go with the flow and go with whatever narrative's thrown at us and just believe everything that we're told? Nobody will tell you that they believe everything that they're told, but we believe a lot of what we're told and don't even really think about or question what the intent is behind people pushing things. You know, they got women smoking cigarettes. If you go back and look at when they were pushing all that, you know, and the individuals, I think his name was, what was his name? Bernays, something Bernays. He wrote a book called Propaganda and some other stuff. He was, I think he was Freud's nephew or something like that. He was connected with Freud. He was, by way of, a relative or whatever.
Yeah.
He was used as one of the propagandists or whatever, like during the First World War. He was the guy also, and pretty interesting book, you know, his book on propaganda, because he said straight up, and he's not the only one that says this, that society needs to be controlled. Society and I'm using my words, but society needs to be led.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to have these individuals, you know, Madison Avenue, you know, getting you thinking that you need all this stuff or whatever, but they sold women on smoking cigarettes through these tactics, right? And that's just one example. But you know, the thing is that all this stuff that's been pushed on society, whether it's making alcohol to be this great, wonderful thing, and alcohol is good in moderation, but it also is one of the biggest killers, right? Yeah. And so destroys people's lives. It destroys marriages. I mean, all kinds of problems come from
lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, smoking cigarettes. It always surprises me how many people still smoke cigarettes. There's not one good thing.
Yeah.
Except maybe, you know, it relaxes you. Well, you didn't start off being relaxed by smoking cigarettes. When I started smoking cigarettes and I started doing the roll your owns, and they weren't real roll your owns, they were the weeds and stuff, because mom had that boyfriend and he was so cool. He was a hippie guy, you know, and I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world, you know? And again, it was me wanting to identify and associate and be a part of something and kind of, you know what I mean? Cause I lacked that so much. During those formative years where that's supposed to be developed. And when you have your focus on the right people and role models, then it will be developed. And those first most important people are your parents. They will always be your parents. Yeah. You know, the representation of a good woman comes from your mom. The representation of a good man comes from your dad. And then, but with the things that we got with, you know, with the sports and everything else, that has taken over family. Yeah. So within family, a good, healthy family, there's a book, I'm going to forget the name of this guy, and it will pop up again and again and again. But I think, and I'm probably getting this wrong, The Family and Civilization by Zimmerman.
Okay.
He goes back, he's a sociologist and stuff, and he goes back and he deals with the family just in history and how important and pivotal the family is, which is one reason why so many of these agendas that are going on right now specifically target the family, the nuclear family for destruction. They will say that. And, you know, maybe not their family, but everybody else's family. Yeah. So the things that are, and there's a reason for that, because within the family, one, if you have a strong, solid, and nobody's perfect. We all are products of our culture and everything else. None of us. So the ideal is something that people learn and strive for. But man, we're just people, you know, and we're all going to fall and we're all going to fail and we're all going to look back and think, man, I wish I would have done this differently. But the bottom line is that we're in an age right now where a lot of those things are being eroded and being broken down, and there's reasons for it. And when you within your family unit, when you have examples, and then your extended family, right? Whoever that is. But when you have those examples and you have to work through things, you got to share, you got to, you know, there's things you have to do. And so it's a smaller representation of society at large. And so anyways, he gets in there. So that would be a really good book to read, just on the history of the family and the importance of the family. And he says in that book, among other things, there's a little outline that he gives of things that a nation is in collapse and dying when these things start to happen. Yeah. And those things are happening. Right. So within the family, I kind of lost track of what I was saying. Sorry. So within within the family unit, you learn how to function. Oh, there was another book. I think his name was Larry Christensen, and he had called the Christian Family. He had a thing on there from a parole officer who was giving, with his dealings with delinquents, some of his stuff that he had to say regarding this. Mm-hmm. And he nailed everything that had to do with delinquency back to the family, and what they learn in the family.
Well, it's cohabitation. Mm-hmm. That's what you're learning. You're learning how to coexist with other human beings,
absolutely,
within your family. And then when that structure breaks down, if you can't exist within your own household, how can you really exist outside of your household on a healthy, from a healthy standpoint?
Yeah. And a healthy society is not the order of the day. It's breaking everything down. Yeah. It's destroying the foundations. It's taking people and children and having them focused on other things, right? So, the father's demeaned and belittled and put down and and all this stuff. And
that's where the role models come in, like with your life, where you started to look at like Kiss.
Oh yeah.
And the darker stuff like that.
Absolutely. So I was primed for all that. And so going back and looking, when I started reading and kind of, really reflecting on things, that's when all this stuff, what I'm saying right now, started to kind of come into shape, because I always, years later, and it wasn't too many years later, it was around when I was, 20 years old, 21 years old, when I started kind of, waking up and kind of realizing some stuff and things, and just wondering, man, what the heck, and then I started reading, and I mean, I love books. I love to read. I can't, encourage it enough for people, especially, even if you're not a huge reader, if you try to get in, and don't just leave it up to school to give your kids books, because they're going to give your kid, unless you're cool with everything they're teaching, your kids, unless you add to it and supplement, then they are the ones that are educating your kid. And maybe that's good, and maybe it's fine, and maybe it's not. That is, a person's responsibility to find out what it is that their kids are being taught. Yeah. Now, one of the things with, so anyways, yes, I don't want to jump around too much. So I was primed for all that stuff. Mm-hmm. I was primed, for Kiss and the horror movies and everything else, and just kind of having that rebellious streak, where the darker path definitely was more attractive because it was presented attractively. Mm-hmm. You're not told that the people that are involved in that, not necessarily every single individual, but the nature of that in and of itself is a very, very corrupt thing. Now, you're going to have people that are going to say, no, blah, 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 it's good and it's healthy, and, you have it twisted. Yeah, there's different levels and stuff like that. A wicked person or whatever that's wanting to follow, that course or whatever, might have issue with something else and all this other stuff. But the bottom line is it opens up doors. It all opens up doors. And I chose, unknowing it all, because things were attractive, right? One road. So it made me susceptible to do the hustling, to go down to run away and be rebellious, to open myself up and be willing to do drugs just for the sake of doing drugs, because I wanted to belong. And,
was it out of spite?
No. It was not out of spite. It was out of just a need to belong and want to be a part of something. I didn't feel that I had any identity of my own.
Okay. Well, what I meant by that was it out of spite to society. Like you were like, fuck that. I'm going to do this. Okay.
Well, I think in a rebellious kind of way, yeah. I had that thing, like that back patch that said "Born to Be Wild." I mean, there was that, but it wasn't in any way developed.
It wasn't against mom or anything like that. I know that. I know
not
that.
Mom especially.
Yeah.
I think later on, past those initial stages, just where things influenced me. Yep. Then there was a little bit more of that, but there was more of that because that came along with the world that I was in. Mm-hmm. That's what you say, all these slogans and things like that people know, which, anything beyond the surface is very little understood, but we all know the surface stuff. And so, then the anarchy and the this and that and the other starts coming into play. Of course, I wouldn't have read any of this stuff. I did read Anton LaVey. I did read Necronomicon, and those
are dark,
trendy, but they're trendy kind of surfacey type things.
Okay.
But so bouncing ahead a little bit, I went to now this is something that I wanted to bring up, because it kind of goes in my evolution of just how I kind of started down certain things. Mm-hmm. so when I was 13, running away, started smoking cigarettes, man, I remember I didn't start becoming like addicted to smoking cigarettes till I was in McLaren. Okay. So up to that point, I even remember when I was going through some of the Boys and Girls AIDS Society in Portland, where I went through this point where everybody else was smoking and I didn't smoke because everybody else was smoking. Now that could be kind of what you were alluding to a little bit on that kind of F society or kind of mentality. I didn't, at that particular time, I didn't want to be the person that was following everybody else, right? If that makes any sense at all, because really I was trying to follow everybody else that was attracted to me. They're my ideas about things. But everybody smokes, and I eventually I didn't stay there very long because I ran away. But I would start smoking cigarettes here and there. Now, when I was going to, and this is when I was 13, and I was going to the City nightclub with Brian. I still remember these guys' names. Then I would smoke a little bit more here and there. And of course, like I said, the MDA and the acid and the pot was just an everyday occurrence. Not the MDA; that was a little bit more periodic. Pot was every single day. Acid was quite a lot, because of the nature of the place that we were at, where drugs were that was the thing, right? You just did drugs. I didn't do a lot of crank. I don't think I did any crank at that particular time, other than that time that I told you I got shot up. Yep. And then, and then there was once I started, I think that was after I got out of McLaren. I think I was around 14, just turned 15. Cause I turned, anyways, I'll figure out the timing, but as far as the cigarette smoke goes, that, because everybody smoked and, of course I picked up on it. When I was going into McLaren though, it was, Mom found cause I would run away. Like I said, go to a group home, get caught, turn myself in, call Mom, and then I would bounce back at home. Now, this all had an impact on you guys. Right. And, for whatever impact that was, and it's something that I've always thought about, because I was never, that's what I did for my whole entire, early years, teenage years or whatever. It was this constant back and forth thing. And so you saw me in that context, and so you guys had to be, dealing with the stuff that dealt with home and school and all that. And then you had to deal with the older brother that was always in and out and getting locked up and because you guys visiting me.
You looked up to your dad. I looked up to you.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean,
no,
I didn't want to make you feel bad, but no. But that kind of gives the evolution of me.
Yeah.
But we'll go into that in a different lifestyle.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Everybody's affected and impacted.
Yeah.
So it's not, what we do affects other people. Yeah. And just like with Dad, nobody would ever say, I'm really, unless they knew they did a really good job, that they're not, that they don't feel sorry and regret for things. Right. And I don't hold anything against Dad. I mean, I understand that, I understand things for sure. But I also know that the impact that people have affects other people and can affect them negatively, that leaves lasting marks. Yeah. And so, and this goes that way for everybody. I affected you guys, I affected you, and that's just kind of how the ball rolls. And unfortunately, that's society, right? And so it just, it just keeps going back and forth. And just like with, it's kind of not relating with that specifically, but just like a lot of stuff that's going on right now in society, what you have is you got these pendulums that go back and forth. And so instead of really zeroing in and trying to figure out, okay, let's take a look at these things honestly and objectively, and how are we not going to make the mistakes of the past? How can we move forward in the best possible way? Instead, what happens is you've got the extremes on every side, kind of getting the dominance and getting the power, and then thinking, okay, now it's our turn. Yeah. For whatever. I'm kind of being vague or whatever, but now it's our turn, and or you're going to try to make right what you believe is right for wrongs that you received. So, one, is that the right thing? Is vengeance and that on that level, especially against people that don't have anything to do with anything, is that really justified? Now, what happens is with the pendulum, and it might be justified in a lot of people's hands, what happens with the pendulum, it's not always going to be over in that area. It's going to swing back in a different direction. And so when people don't, if everybody is going, back and forth, and then you got wars and you got this and revolutions and all this other stuff, people that are wronged are going to remember those things and then want to make them right. Now, the problem with that is that we get these extremes of what ends up happening, you know, and if you look
like
at
an overcompensation,
total overcompensation, you look at the revolutions that have gone on since the French Revolution, man, these are bloody, horrible things. And people are held guilty just by virtue of their class or their this or their that or their the other. When most people are just doing what everybody else does, you know, but they get lumped into this category and then they're made to be, you know, whatever and the object of vengeance and, you know, and things get really blown out of proportion, you know, and get really, really crazy. And, okay. So, and I think about this a lot because just of everything that's going on, you know, and of course, what is the right response to stuff, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, society's ebb and flow, just like everything else. You know, our responsibility is to do what we believe is the right thing to do. But with the bigger picture of societies and things kind of going back and forth and nothing really ever, you know, if these extremes always kind of win out, nothing really is ever resolved, right? Yeah. Because people remember stuff and maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong what they remember, but they remember, you know, they remember. And, you know, and so nothing ever gets fixed is my point, right? Yeah. So, but within families, you get this generational thing where when stuff starts to kind of go south and you have issues and you have problems and then you have kids and then you learn things and you learn, you know, how not to be there, you know, or you learn, you know, instead of just dealing with the responsibility and the hardships, like with marriage, you know, I think about this all the time. I mean, I love Jill, but like everything else, we're still two different people that have to learn to live together. Right. And I think about this, especially when I'm in my moments of being upset or she is or whatever, you know, does that justify me ever leave? And I think about it, not because I'm thinking about doing it, but because I'm thinking in terms of just the responsibility of sticking to certain things. And for me, personally, you know, getting married was a religious thing, right? You vow to God that you're going to do certain things. And that means nothing in society anymore. Yeah. You know, your word, your vow, it just doesn't mean anything. Right. And so I'm just saying this in the context of families learn behavior and they learn things and they pass it on to their kids, even not intending to. And then their kids perpetuate certain problems and stuff like that. And then you just have generations of people that are just kind of screwed up in their own way. Right. And, because things affect him, you know, and I kind of got off track there, but my point with, I suppose with the family thing is, one, it means a lot to me because it's, you know, looking back, even when I started running away and everything, I always knew that my mom was going to be there. I always knew that, you know, and I loved you guys, that you guys were going to be there. You guys were the constant and the steady that was there when I was dysfunctional and doing all that stuff. Right. I knew. And there's a lot of kids out there that don't have that. Yeah. You know, they don't have, you know, good parents or, you know, people that are really involved or their parents are, you know, screwed up on drugs or just whatever, right?
Support system.
No support system whatsoever. Yeah. And your family, you know, so, you know, and that's too bad. Right. But I always knew for me that this happened many, many times when I was scared, when I was, you know, one thing or another, or it just wasn't fun anymore or whatever, that I can call mom and mom would literally come and pick me up.
I remember there were times middle of the night, we'd fucking drive from 3 hours to go get you. Yeah. I remember.
Yeah. And, you know, and of course I'm not thinking about the impact that has on other people. I'm not thinking about the worry that I'm putting mom through, you know, but I had that. And so, you know, maybe people could say, okay, well, that's kind of enabling and all that other stuff. Yeah, I get it, you know, but where do you draw the line as a parent when it comes to your kid? And me thinking about stuff, the way that I was is if I did not have mom to come and do that with the situations that I was putting myself in, it would have been a drug overdose. You know, probably would have got killed. I mean, there's numerous things that would have happened. You know, I was not going to be with tough love from where I was at. Then when mom says no, come home and get my life together. It just wasn't going to happen. Yeah. You know, so it just is what it is. But my point is that I'm appreciative that, you know, that you guys were always there, that mom was always there. And all the way through the years, the thing that always was there And one of the reasons that I've always, when I talk, your family, the importance of family, is because if you have that and you know that, then it means an awful lot. Mm-hmm. And then when you see forces in the world that are trying to tear those things apart and tear your kids away from you and create these, these gaps and all this other stuff, there's intent behind that. Mm-hmm. And, and that's a pretty wicked thing, know. But, okay. So anyways, got a little off track there, but my point in talking it all is to give just kind of where I'm at or what I was thinking about or whatever. Right. Mm-hmm. So, but anyways, so I went into McLaren, all the smoking thing. So I went in, determined that I was going to smoke cigarettes. Mom found a carton of cigarettes underneath the, the bed. Mm-hmm. And, but in juvenile at that time, you can smoke. So I was in one of the juveniles you couldn't, the other one you could smoke. And then in McLaren, you could smoke. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, it was in going through there that I really became what I would say would be addicted to cigarettes. Right. Mm-hmm. So up until that point, it was just a little bit here, a little bit there. But again, I had the mindset because everybody smoked, the cool kids smoked, I was going to smoke. And, so I went in to McLaren, and when I was 13, going through this phase of, Kiss, I was basically like that type of rocker, person, right? Basic metal, Iron Maiden, Motley Crue came out. I think Motley Crue, 86. Anyways, this is before 86, but I was into the basic metal stuff right before then, but it was Kiss is what I was focused on. So I wasn't introduced to any of the real hard stuff or anything. I think I heard about Metallica and a couple bands in the group home, one of the group homes, and then of course, in McLaren. And so I remember running around and having, so I liked the breakdancing movies, like I said, and I liked whatever movies were coming out at that time that had to do with the gang stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And I had this infatuation with getting to LA because of the way that it looked on TV. It was attractive. And I remember running away from a group home and stealing some stuff and from a store, because I was a little klepto when I was a kid, and ripping stuff off at stores. And it was so easy to go in there and put a pair of pants underneath my other pants because you're not really suspicious, right, when you're a kid. I'm sure I didn't, might have looked like I had something, but you get away with a lot when you're young. Mm-hmm. And I had this glove that I had, like Michael Jackson's glove. I had these parachute pants and stuff, man. I mean, so this is, exactly, man. Total freaking early 80s, thing. And, so that's kind of where I was at, kind of, playing around with stuff, trying to figure things out when I went to McLaren, and then, came out, went home with you guys. You had been in Washington at that time. And then, that was, a couple months, 4 months before I turned 15, cause I was 14. And then once I started, getting, wanting to get out there and run around again. It was then that I started, I don't remember exactly. I don't remember if I went with my dad. I was going to work with my dad, right? Do some masonry or whatever. Mm-hmm. Something. I know that happened later after Nacelle, but anyway, something got me to where I started running and taking off again, right? Now I'd been to Seattle a couple times when I was younger, and so it was Portland mainly, but it was also in Seattle a little bit. And then, I know Dad lived in Everett, and I did go to stay with him because I remember being in Everett. I remember it was after McLaren, and then running away, starting to take off again, just because I was just wild, right? I didn't, it wasn't, getting fulfilled as, whatever I felt that I needed at that time, because I already had that streak, right? And so I was going to Seattle more. Now, this is 1986, going into 1986, and again, I dyed my hair black. I started to grow, wanted to have it real long, but started to grow it long as I could, at that particular time. And then I got introduced because I'm running around in Seattle. So I have my friends. One of my friends is named Eric, and then we had a couple other street kids, right? That we were hanging out with and getting tight with and everything. And so I remember before I really started getting into the Slayer and the speed metal and getting acquainted with like punk rock and the different scenes that was going up in Seattle at that time. We'd run around. We were just causing havoc. We'd sleep in squad houses. Like I said, we'd go downtown and we all hustled. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? We didn't talk about it. Me and Eric kind of went, to do a couple things, not with each other. Yeah. But we knew what we were doing. Yeah. And the girls that we were running around with, everybody knew what they were doing. We'd go down to Second and Madison and things like that. And but a lot of it too was there was hustling, and then there was just, like prostitution type stuff. And then there was ripping people off too. I mean, there was all that going on, but see, I'm 15 now. I'm a little bit bigger. I'm a little bit more wilder and bolder. And so, again, we would go out and run around and just cause havoc, pick fights with people and picking fights with adult dudes. Cause that was,
street life.
Yeah. But it was just, so on one level I'm doing this nasty stuff and it's all a hustle, right? It's, I learned, like a lot of people learn that you can do certain things to get certain stuff. And for me, that was just one of it. I got a lot of attention and it's just what it is. Right. But we would dress up, I'd be Gene Simmons and we'd have our, and again, it's just the friggin',
the act.
Exactly. We'd have the friggin' tights and the, all the clothes and stuff like that. And we'd run around and it's just dine and dash and just, a lot of it was fun. Like 1986, in Seattle, to me, was a lot of fun, and so it was bouncing from Seattle to where we lived, and God, where was that? Where Michael lived, his house there, Montesano.
Oh yeah, okay.
So, and then I had some friends that in Aberdeen, that I was running around with when I was there, and but Seattle was a ton of fun, right? Yeah. And, cause nothing was too crazy, I still wasn't like, I was young. But I hadn't been impacted too terribly much. Now I think obviously it was getting locked up. If I'm allowed to do and run for myself, I'm going to go too far. So there's been things that have been able to kind of get in the way and stop me from doing that, and going to juvenile had done that for sure, both times. Well, anyways, so this was, and I know I covered a little bit of this before, but I kind of wanted to bring up a couple different things just because that was just kind of my growth. But, okay. So, I'm running around, we're all running around and then I'm kind of changing, right? So I'm going from kind of the basic stuff, what I would consider kind of basic, more to the more darker, heavier, it was meeting people and it was Venom and it was freaking Slayer and it was these hardcore bands, right? At the time, this is like, man, this is new. It's fresh. This is my speed. I love this stuff. And so up at Broadway and down in University District, you had your different assortment of types of people. Right. And so, like I said, it was fresh. It was, it was wild. It was, and it was a lot of fun. And so, but I also, when I was doing this in kind of the early stages of that, again, I had my hair dyed black and then I got introduced to Tom. And with my one friend that introduced me, and then I said the first thing that the night especially. So during this time, the early days of this time, then I'm starting to get more into the Satanism that I was involved in. Now it's not this extravagant stuff and rituals, and there was a lot of stuff that was being done that was ritualistic and ritualized, but it was perverted shit, right? From his point. So again, I got into, this heavier stuff because it fit the image, especially Venom, Venom were now, again, I'm impressionable. So this was real life almost. Right. And they were satanic and, these bands are satanic and it's like, this is my speed. And so, then I started going down that road and it was all, and because some of the friends that I had were, like at that time they were called Bat Cavers. I think they call them Goss now, but they call themselves Bat Cavers. And then of course you had your punks and your different, people. But so I'm kind of more with that crowd, not the Bat Caver crowd. That wasn't me, but I was associating with people that were part of that. And so I remember some of these girls that we were hanging out with that were friends. We'd get high and I'm, just, they'd do the mascara. And so I'm all black, leather jacket, combat boots, everything was black. And so that was kind of what I started to get into at that time. Right. Yep. In 1986, bouncing back and forth here and there, between Aberdeen and Seattle. And I'm with this individual. So I had all the access to the drugs, like I said, the drugs that we had. So it's all the time, every single day. The only time I didn't get high on speed, which I was shooting, was when I just needed to sleep, And so it just got real heavy with that. I remember, getting paranoid and the paranoia that would come in and just all kinds of stuff. Right now, one of the things I do want to say about this individual was that's always stood out is he would scare other people, right? I mean, adult people that were, bigger than me he had them he would have them scared, And, so there was something about him that was definitely, I don't know what it is. I don't know. But, one of the things that from day one with this guy, and this can all be subjective, I've always thought a lot about it, cause you got hypnosis, you got a lot of things that are involved in a lot of stuff. Right. But his face would change. So I shit you not, he was the same person, but it would literally change. And I'm not the only person that said it. I'm not the only person that's seen it. Right.
Reptilian?
No, it wasn't reptilian. It was just, it would change. Okay. And what I mean by change is it was him, but it was more sinister him.
Gotcha.
But it would change, yeah. And I'm not making that up.
No,
right?
I believe
and
you.
It wasn't just, being high and stuff like that. But it never scared me, right? I mean, I literally got in fistfights with this dude on several occasions. He never had me scared. But what would happen sometimes, and some of the things that I felt on a couple of occasions, one particular occasion, and I was tweaking, so you can write it all off to being paranoid or whatever. But this is just one of the things that happened was I done something in my mind. I done something. I crossed the line, and I done something. I crossed the line. Now, in my paranoia, and it is true, you can hear through walls and hear all the conversations and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's all true. Mm-hmm. But I'm sitting in a room, and I got my leather jacket on, and I got my hair coming down over my face, and I'm kind of like this, and I can see the bottom part of the door, but I'm scared as hell. I'm so scared. And then somebody came in the other room, and they were talking to somebody. So because this dude did something, right? He did something. I don't know what he did, but he did something, right? And then that's when I heard like a lizard type thing. I know this sounds fucking crazy. This is paranoid. I get it, but this is kind of my psyche and stuff that was going on. And I remember hearing it, and then I remember them stabbing this fucking dude, man. And I can hear it was just eerie, creepy, sucking sound. And then the dude, he got ate, and that was that. Now a little while later, okay,
he got ate.
Like they ate him. The lizard thing ate him.
Okay.
So this is all in my head, but again, when you're doing things and you're high and you're mixing the drugs and the all the paranoia that comes along with it, and everything else, and then all the other stuff that's at work and the forces that are at play, right? Then all kinds of crazy stuff happens. I don't need to explain it because this is my world and the things that were impacting me. Because you can't explain it, right? Yeah. But so a while later, like I said, I'm thinking, man, I did something, I did wrong. Now the relationship that we had was a master slave thing, right?
Okay.
And I was the master, and he was a slave sort of situation, right? And so, but in in this situation again, I mean, obviously, I messed up, I did something, I broke a rule, I did something, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm down here. And I have my head where I couldn't see the top part of the door, but I can see the bottom part of the door. And something walked in, and I'm not exaggerating. I physically saw this. Something walked in, stood in the doorway, looked at me, and it had a robe, right? Now, he had robes. He had robes in it, but it was in the room that I was in. There was 2 rooms. There was a living room. There was no way of getting out of the house because it was in the bottom part of a house. Mm-hmm. So there was one door. The windows were barred, but the back room had one of those where you can open it up. It was like an escape kind of thing. You can open it up, and it would open up, and you'd have to get in, over.
Like a cellar.
Yeah, it's kind of recessed. Yeah. So you have to kind of get in there, but it has enough room where you can get in there and you can get out, right? Because they have to have that. But that's what was there. So unless this thing walked in, and unless I'm completely imagining it, looked at me for a couple seconds or whatever, and then walked into that back bedroom. The only exit, and I never seen it come out, and I went in there a little while later, the only exit was through that window, right? So Tom had robes because he had the garments and the priest stuff from being a priest, right? Mm-hmm. So he had them all in there, but it was in the room that I was in. And it could have been, I don't know what the heck it was, but it was always really creepy and one of those things. Now, a little while later, I go in there, and me and him are in there, and I'm like, okay, I gotta make this right? And and talking shit and doing kind of Satan stuff. And then that's going to, again, all be imaginary. This is just the remembering things that I had. So on my leg, I'm around there, and on my leg, I swear to God, I felt something on my leg. Right. And I remember I jumped, and it freaked me out, and I looked around, and there was nothing there, but in that moment, it was like the realization that this ain't a game, right? And I'm in it, and I'm saying I believe all this shit or whatever, but this isn't a game. And if there really is forces and there really is stuff out there, that's kind of freaky, right? And of course, nothing happened, and I went through my paranoia and all this other stuff. So that's a memory. There's a ton of them. I won't go into them. And there was one other that I wanted to talk about real quick. Okay, so towards the end of my being with him in 1986 in Seattle, we were at this one place, and it was I don't know what you'd call it. It was a thing where it was like, you had to pay to get in. It was kind of a private type sort of thing. Not like private, like only select people go there private. It was one of those gay places where you go there and everything's kind of out in the open, and they got rooms and, the bondage stuff, and just one of those places you can go there and walk around naked. I mean, it's just one of those types of places, if that, anyways. But it was all black. It was on Pike Street, past downtown, but going up. And so we were staying there. We had a room there. And the owner was a really cool dude, and didn't do anything with him or whatever, but he was a real cool guy and stuff. And but I remember being paranoid again, and it happened a lot, being paranoid again, and then being on acid though, right? And so I remember going through the dying process underneath the bed, and I literally went through every stage of dying. My organs are shutting down, and I knew that the last thing that was going to shut down was my brain, right? And I'm kind of almost willing it to shut down or whatever. And it was really freaky. I remember peeing my pants, and then I kind of came to. And Tom was up, on the bed sleeping, and I came to, and in my mind I had died, and but in that process, and this is why I'm even bringing this up, I thought I was dying, okay, and I remember praying to Jesus because I knew Jesus was where the real power was at, right? It was not Satan. Every day I was doing stuff that Satan, this, that, and the other, and but that is not, in my moment of when I thought I was really going to die, it wasn't Satan I was going to, it was Jesus. Yeah. But I kind of came to a little bit, and I thought, man, I'm dead. And it's one of those things like in a ghost story where, they reach out to the person, and then, and then they find out that person's dead, and that person reached out to him. So this is playing out in my mind. So I woke up, and I'm standing in front of Tom. I'm just looking at him, and I said a couple things to him. And of course he's, crashed out sleeping, and stuff. And then, everything's back to normal the next day or whatever, but it was a weird experience.
Were you out of body at that time?
No. I was in me, I was fully, in my own faculties, and underneath the bed, I was me.
Yeah.
But I was just going through the dying process,
Gotcha.
Which was very, very, very scary.
Yeah, okay.
And that's not the only time my paranoia got, so extreme, especially after Nacelle, when I started running around again, and that was on a different level. I started getting back in, and I'll go into that. But at this point, this is before Nacelle, and this is pretty much very close to being my last interaction with Tom at that particular time. Okay. Now, there is one other thing I want to bring up. Okay, so he had me fitted out from a person that he knew, a chain kind of bondage kind of chain thing, right? And I don't want to read things into something because there's stuff that we'll just never, ever know. We'll never, ever know, right? You'll never know intent. You're never going to get your answers, especially when you're getting stuff and trying to figure things out in your life. You're just never going to do it because you can't sit down and talk with that other person and that other person be completely honest with you, right? So the struggle that I've had over the years is really trying to figure things out and just wonder. And and this takes you into rabbit holes and trails and this and that and the other, and overthinking stuff when maybe it was never that complicated in the first place. But because of the impact that it had, obviously it's a lot of stuff that I thought about over the years. Now, like I said, one of the things that he did was his interaction with me was his constant talking about stuff, right? And it was these repetitive themes, and it was just over and over. And it was, again, it was me being a slave and all this other stuff. And, and it was just repetitive. Now, but anyways, but we had some issues. We'd have, flare-ups and stuff like that. And I was, like I said, I was never afraid of him on a physical level or whatever. I don't know, but I think that there might've been one of the issues that I had, that I was starting to have, was that I was feeling like, in my young 15-year-old mind, I really wanted to know about Satanism. I wanted to know about the occult. I wanted to know more stuff. Yeah. And I felt like this whole thing that was going on was nothing but a fucking perverted dude getting his kicks off with me. Yeah. And that's what it was all about. And Satan was just kind of thrown in there. Yeah. Right.
To make it look.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that he believed all that, but it never went beyond that point.
So you were saying, though, he got you fitted for a bondage
right.
outfit.
And so I just wonder, and this goes along with that, one of the things that I was wondering about is maybe I was being set up for something, right? Yeah. And maybe not, maybe it was innocent, but we never did that before, right?
Okay.
And it was a chain one, right? And so, years later when I'm doing more reading and everything, and you hear about, some of the, kind of horror stories and stuff like that, there's always that just wondering, was there something more going to go on? Maybe it was at the end of something, you know what I'm saying?
Like
with me,
your use is no longer
maybe.
Okay.
Or maybe it was going to go in a different direction. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was a new kind of thing. Never met the other dude, but I got fitted out for a chain one that he was going to make, and the issue with the chain one is if you're in a chain and you get locked up, you ain't going anywhere. Right. Yeah. And so who effing knows. Right. And maybe it's completely innocent and it's nothing, but it was something new that was thrown into the mix at the end. And then, so anyways, I felt like things were coming to an end, sort of. Again, it was the paranoias, it was the drugs, it was just all this stuff. And I went back to Aberdeen or whatever. And then I ended up at some point, relative to this timing, I got in trouble for running away with Missy and a couple of the other people there. And and I do not do this anymore. I feel totally awful. But when I did these burglaries, it was one burglary and it was going in there. We were running away basically, and it was taking food, and it's a horrible, horrible thing. I mean, now I'm obviously, I would literally bite my arm off before I would steal anything or do anything like that. Yeah. I mean, anybody who knows me, I think they get that impression. I'm very, very anti any of that stuff.
I think if people judge you for something you did 40 years ago, they got bigger fish
to fry. Absolutely. But people do.
I know.
But I'm just, but this was a thing that was in those years, up to being 15 years old. It was petty crime. It was ripping, stuff off and clothes off at stores.
Well,
it was dining and dashing.
You had to do.
Yeah. But we went in there and did that, took off. The cops were called. Poor lady came home, these 4 kids are in her house, and we just went off running. And I got, very nice lady. They're a Mormon family. And when I was in Nacelle, they would send me a Christmas gift every year. I was there for 2 years. So, but anyways, I think they know that there wasn't evil intent. We were just stupid freaking teenagers. But, but anyways, when we all ran, I hid under a boat. Now I smoked. So I couldn't run that far, right? And when you're scared and your adrenaline's going up, you can run. But then, of course, when you don't really realize how unfit you might be until the time is really important, which is one of the things that goes in with fitness. It's like, if you're not taking care of your weakest link, you think you're okay in a situation. Exactly. If you don't have good calves or you don't have something, the bottom line is when you are engaged in certain things, those things are going to fail you, right? And as a person that's doing sports and stuff like that, you train everything, know? So I hid under this boat. They got the cop dogs out, and I got pulled out when the cop flipped over the boat, and I didn't think he expected me to be under there because he jumped back. He pulled his gun like he was shocked, and it was a Rottweiler. Oh, and this dog grabbed me by the head. I had my leather jacket on, put my hand in his mouth. So I got a little scar here. It's just it's not a tear, but it's from the, so he grabbed me there. Cop had me on one arm. The dog grabbed my leg. He has my muscle and is pulling me, and I'm crying and I'm screaming. And so one cop had me by the arm, dog had me by the leg. They're yelling at me, lay down, lay down. And one cop came up and kicked me in the gut. And the kick did nothing.
Yeah.
It did not buckle me. It did not do anything. I was, obviously the adrenaline was kicked in pretty hard, but I went down because I had to, and I was scared to death. And, you know, and when they tell you to, you know, spread out and to be calm when you got a dog on your ass, that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
So these guys they show on cops and things like that, that are getting ripped apart by dogs, and the cops are screaming at them to be calm. It's kind of hard to do that because your instinct is to try to protect yourself.
Yeah. You're being eaten alive.
You're told to not protect yourself with something that's feeling like it's tearing you apart.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I did that. The cop was on my leg down here. And then once I was all spread to, you know, it stopped chewing on me. It was just there. And I got this growling dog on me, and the cops have their guns on me, and they arrested me and took me and whatnot. Well, they had been told or thought, because the lady said that a gun had been moved. Now, we didn't touch any guns or do anything. Now, maybe somebody else grabbed it, but we didn't take it. Nobody took a gun. And so they thought that we had a gun. So that's why I think that the extra force was used, which I understand that, you know, now. But I went to Nacelle now, you know, so I was the only one to get locked up. I got 2 years. They were tired of me in Aberdeen because of the reputation I had there. So they put me away for 2 years, right? Because that would send me away till I was 18 years old. And everybody else got parole, probation, whatever. And in Nacelle, I walked in. When I walked in there, you know, a couple months later, my counselor, Mr. Harris, looked at me, and I had this dog collar, you know, around my neck, and I had, you know, black with the blonde kind of grown out, and you know, I was just a sight to look at, I'm sure. He looked at me and just shook his head, and you know, and you know, because they had everything that you know, my PO at the time, because I had been involved in stealing a person's who was I don't want to go into all that, but because of what ended up happening to that dude, but not that I did to him, but he was a upstanding member of society, so to say, and you know, we were together. And I ripped him off, and then the cops got involved in it. And, you know, because of the situation with me and him and everything else, you know, just stuff, you know what I'm saying? But I didn't have anything to do with it. But, but I was on probation for theft, but they were sick of seeing me. They, you know, the parole officer that I had at the moment, you know, thought I was on a death trip and told, like, you know, Missy and my other, you know, friends or whatever. I don't know if he told Missy, but the girl that was in juvenile with me, that I was on a death trip and should stay away from me and all this shit, you know, stuff. And, you know, I get it. You know, what I am is I'm a very screwed up 15-year-old kid that's into some really extreme stuff. And, you know, I'm not going out there hurting animals, or I've never done any of that, or doing anything, but I was of that kind of, you know, mindset, you know, and this was a normal thing in the 80s, and some people scoff at it and all that other stuff. But because of the music that was coming out and the change of the scene in society, you know, and you got more your hard metal that deals with that element of stuff, and you know, and you kids chase this fantasy, and they got whatever's going on in their life that are setting them up and make them prone to stuff. And fortunate for me, I didn't do anything bad. Some of these guys, they take this shit to an extreme, and they'll kill one of their friends, or they'll kill somebody, because that's what that stuff is all about, right? Even if somebody says that it ain't. If you've got somebody that says that they are a Satanist and a practicing Satanist, but he or she wouldn't do certain things, they've just not been doing it long enough. Because those boundaries are gone. Because if you have, just like Marxism, if you have morality that tells you not to do something, you stay with your wife, or you don't mess around with your kids, or whatever. No, because that comes from a certain background. That comes from a certain religion that has imposed that viewpoint on you. And in order to, you know, rebel against it or whatever, you do the things
the opposite.
You do the opposite. And just like Anton LaVey said, you know, Aleister Crowley was a little bit more real with it, you know, with stuff at least, but Anton LaVey on the surface was more, you know, for the mass appeal or whatever, but who knows what they did behind closed doors, you know, but he said Satanism is not even believing in a real Satan. It's fulfilling your animalistic desires.
Indulgence, total indulgence.
And so that's very attractive for people that are that are just in a rebellious age, that are rebelling against stuff. It's like, oh, well, society says I shouldn't do this, but yet it's going to be more fulfilling if I go and do this over here. Well, that was the tempter's thing with Eve. You know, we were given boundaries that are good boundaries and healthy boundaries, and you're going to be fulfilled. You're going to be fulfilled. But the enticement of going and doing this other stuff, well, all this other stuff comes at a price. And so, I mean, it always will. It'll come at a price. Yep. And so, but anyways, so I was in Nacelle, he was a Christian, you know, counselor. And so I, you know, maybe gave a little bit of lip service, you know, to it or whatever, but I always really struggled with the whole Satan thing, you know, and, you know, I'd be in the shower and I'd, you know, do the stuff that I became used to doing, you know, with talking and stuff like that. And, but I was in there for 2 years, and I did go to a group home in Tacoma for a short period of time, ran away, and, you know, went to Portland and, you know, turned myself in a couple months later, went back, finished out my time in Nacelle. And then, you know, so I had this, and I was working out, I was getting healthy, and I felt great. I mean, I felt great. I mean, being healthy, because I've always had that other, while I was out there running the streets, I did the opposite. You know, I didn't take care of myself. I did, you know, all that stuff. When I was locked up, both in McLaren, because they had weights, and in Nacelle, I did really, really good. So I did really good in that type of an environment, in a controlled environment. I did very good. But I was able to get healthy and everything else. But that was that reprieve of getting me away from myself before I did too much damage to myself or somebody else. And, you know, and so for, you know, a couple of years, I was okay, not for a couple of years, but I was okay for a while. I went back with my dad to do masonry and to do a trade. And I remember being in Aberdeen or Montesano and going over there, and I wasn't really doing anything. I was doing okay. You know, I think I started to slip in certain areas, but I wasn't in the city. So it was different, you know, and then, but I'm working with my dad, and this is my curse. Okay. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't have, you know, really friends. I was working, I was bored, and I'm like, man, I just, you know, I crave that excitement. You know, I craved excitement. And so, you know, I opened up those doors, and then I remember going out, and I took some acid. It was in Everett, and I started to kind of hang out a little bit more over there, come in late at night, you know, and having to work. I did some acid one night, and my dad was just not let, I don't think he was not letting me sleep in, right? The one thing I could say about Dad is no matter what, and he did try, you know, when I was initially there with him, it was one thing, right? You know, but Dad got away from a bunch of stuff, and he was working and you know, and he was trying, you know, he was trying in the way that he could, you know, to provide me, you know, him being there, structure and a job and stuff, you know, a trade is what it would have been. And I threw it all away, you know, and so I started, but anyways, you know, there was things that got set in motion. I started to mess around a little bit, not with anything hard, but I just started to kind of snowball. And then I started to go back to Seattle. Yeah. And unfortunately, because drugs were such a big part of my life, you know, wasn't long until I started to kind of go down that road again. And, but, you know, I you know, started to involve myself in different things. You know, again, it's that identity thing, you know, certain things became attractive to me, and from the way that, you know, either from remembrances of certain people, or what I seen. And, you know, again, it wasn't real because I wasn't educated in anything, you know what I mean? I was following something. I was following an image, but anyways, kind of being vague there just on purpose. Yep. But I started, you know, also messing with drugs. And of course I started fucking going and doing the other shit, you know, because I could. And, even though I had no attraction, I'm not. And when I say that, I'm not downplaying anything or anybody else's experience or whatever, but for me, it was never about that. It was a tool. Right. Yeah. And so, but I started, doing drugs, and I don't remember when I started, you know, shooting, but I opened up that door and I did started shooting, you know? And so I'm running around and started getting back into, you know, shooting up, and just involved in running around. And of course there's this double life going on, right? So on one hand, I've got, you know, friends that are part of this other world, right? That I'm trying to have that image of. And then on this end over here, it was this other thing that I'd become accustomed to since I was young, right? And then trying to keep the two worlds apart. Yeah. You know, and but the drugs got heavier. and it was, a couple years of just kind of snowballing, going downhill. Made my way to San Francisco because I heard San Francisco had a really good scene there and blah, blah, blah. And I hitchhiked down there, and we'll go into all the details of everything. But in San Francisco, it was keeping the worlds apart. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, so I learned to be, I learned to do that, and, but the drugs were always there. As a matter of fact, when I went to San Francisco, there'd been a little reprieve where it wasn't, when I say drugs, I'm not saying I did all the time. I was always getting high. Mm-hmm. These were spurts where I would go and depend on a situation. If I was in Seattle or whatever, I'd do these runs or I'd have these spurts or whatever. Yeah. And so it wasn't like this consistent, constant thing all the time. But and I actually went from Eddie's place, and I went on the freeway. We were visiting there, and I was either going to go south to California, and if I didn't get a ride, I was going to go back to Seattle, and I got a ride. And of course it was somebody, that was, of that persuasion that, but again, at this time I still had my health. Right. Mm-hmm. So I didn't look like a street kid. I didn't look unhealthy, whatever. I'm 18 years old, and so, so anyways, I got a ride. I got a ride for quite some time. And then I got another ride that took me to Ashland, and I got a ride that from there, was able to take me all the way into San Francisco. Mm. And this guy's trying to find his girlfriend, and she took off, and he's, which is great for me because he was going to LA and I was able to get wired some money and to help pay for the gas. And we went down there. Well, anyways, I'll make this kind of quick here. So I got to San Francisco, and I was determined I was not going to do drugs. Right. And so I ran into some people, and I won't go into every story, but anyways, I ran into some people and started hanging out. And, San Francisco is this great city when you're young because it's fast. It's a big city. It's dirty, and it's totally dirty, and downtown. And so anyways, I'm living this life. You know what I'm saying? I'm on the streets. I'm running around with, this crowd of people. But I'm also, going off and because there's a lot of crank there, a lot of, speed and stuff. And going off and doing this other stuff and getting high and it got worse. It got worse. And so my paranoia, because it's like, I'm living this double life. I got this secretive part of me and this secretive life that I don't want anybody to know about, but I felt like I was totally trapped, and I can't get away from it. And I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be this drug user. I don't want to, and again, this, I would remember, and things did snowball, and they snowballed really bad. And, I'm really bad, and, terrible paranoia and just a lot of crap. Right. And so it was when I ended up leaving there, it was the circumstances that allowed me to get out and stay away were, to me, just, again, it was an intervening hand that allowed this to happen. I won't go into all the details right now, but it's, I definitely believe that, it wasn't an easy thing. Like I said, I was up on that tenement building, paranoid, strung out, and praying to God, please get me out of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Get me off drugs if I got to spend the rest of my life in prison. I mean, I hated this so bad. I remember seeing people, that just had their little apartment. It didn't have to be much, just something, because I didn't have anything, sleeping in squat houses and stuff, and being hungry and tired a lot and just strung out and feeling icky and it just, things were going downhill. People were going to jail and just kind of phasing out and things like that. And, we didn't do anything really serious, but I mean, it was just the basic street life, right? And everything that goes along with that. But I was able to get away and get back. But at that time, everything was just a shambles, everything was a freaking shambles, And so as far as me being able to be in a condition to where I was, unless something was going to really take me and sit me down and force me to kind of get things together. I was just too, I couldn't even when I wanted to, and I wanted to with Mom. She was trying to help me out and everything. And it's like, it just didn't matter because I just had that part of me, that wild part of me, craved excitement, craved, the city, craved just the excitement of everything and the extremity of everything. And it was too much. Now I'll say one more thing and I'll go ahead and wrap this up. I bounced back and forth to Seattle a couple of times, and I did run into Tom. Okay. And I'd ran into him a couple other times, kind of pretty conveniently. And, and went on a run, crank run, and, won't go into everything, but the last time I was out, was trying to rob somebody, right? A trick, and I was just, again, I was kind of been, cranked out. I was messed. I was just,
burned out.
And then lo and behold, look who comes freaking walking down the street, Tom. And I see him and I'm yell at him and I went over and, everything would just happen to be convenient. He'd open his arms and, hey, come on up. We got this place right here and, and everything else and, and stuff. And of course, and I'd known for some time as far as the Satanist thing is that was behind me. Right.
Yeah.
It had affected me and I'd been in that world. And when I was a young person, I was definitely gung ho with my ideas and stuff, but there came a point, and it was after I got out of NACL especially, and I started getting back into drugs, where I knew that I was being destroyed, right? And I knew this, and I knew that all that was involved, and so, but again, I had to play a role. I had to play a role with a lot of people, and so when I ran into him and we went up there and got high, and his talking and everything else kind of set in. Now, so there was a couple of days, and this is the last time that I saw him. Now, I was strung out, cranked out days, going through, paranoia and just real delusional. And I remember him trying to get me to sacrifice myself somehow. Okay. And, something with Satan as far as me being a slave and certain, I don't remember all the detail of the words, but I remember resisting it. I remember, cause I'm playing a role again, right?
Yeah.
Playing a role with this dude. Right. And, but I remember resisting it and like, no, cause he wanted me to, articulate or whatever and go with him, whether it was just for him to get his rocks off, and get his jollies. Like he thought I was really strung along with all this stuff, or what. Right. But I told him, no, I'm not going to do that. And that kind of threw him off. And so while I was delusional and high and everything else, that is the impression that I have at that time. I wasn't giving into this or whatever, because I knew that Satan was destroying me.
Yep.
Right. I was destroying myself, but I was being destroyed,
Yep.
And so anyways, terrible paranoia. I won't go into details, but it was a horrible paranoia I was going through. It was me getting just terrible death, and suffering before I died. And, but I remember taking off and just being super, super scared, paranoid. I thought all you guys had been killed. I'm looking up on buildings and now I'm noticing all this stuff that I never saw before. And these little signs, that we were at war and we lost and we were kind of invaded and things like that. And I remember looking up on buildings and I didn't know anything about communism back then. I didn't know any, details or whatever. I wasn't, but I'd see these friggin', on the top of buildings, these walls that had all these holes in them where they were bullet holes, where people were being freaking, I didn't see them physically getting killed, but where they were getting executed. I walked down it was the night before. This is like the next day when I took off, but the night before I went walking down to where the Greyhound was downtown, and I'm just fucking scared, right? And I'm thinking, okay, we're at war, and like a Civil War situation. And I remember dodging, gangbangers that were up, in one of the buildings. And I'm literally, if you would have saw me and you would have laughed your ass off because I saw him up there and I'm doing this dodging thing, trying
Like
to
they were
avoid
shooting
being
at
shot.
you.
Yeah. And some other things happened, but I went down and I saw people in bushes, which is common when you're tweaking. And, but this is like a Chinese thing, right? So there's all this stuff that's going on. The Chinese are involved. And I was just scared. And I had to force myself to walk because there was no place for me to go. Oh, I walked by the Greyhound and I'm walking by the Greyhound and the windows are all blown out, like fire that was in there. It busted them. You can see where the smoke and the fire had caused damage. The taxi drivers that were sitting in in their cars, you see bullet holes in them. And, so the ones that are sleeping, they look like they were dead. And people are really eerie. And so in my mind, it's like, okay, we're in a civil war. And what's happening is they're having these fights, right? And then everything has to get kind of cleaned up to make it to where it seems normal. And I was right in the middle of something going down or whatever, right? And then I started walking because I had to get the hell out of there. And I started walking, and they're packing up all these boxes that look like they're casket size boxes. And I'm scared to fucking death, man. I'm just like, God, I'm scared, man. I'm scared. And so I go walking up and stuff. And then Tom comes around with this other dude that had been, around for a couple days or whatever. And then, they were driving, they're like, get in, and they had something that they ripped off and there was some gas smelling in the car. And I thought, fuck, these guys are going to throw gas on me and try to kill me. And so I had the car door just a little bit opened, but the light kept coming on. Well, that doesn't look good, even if under normal circumstances, because the cops will see that and then they'll know something's up. But anyways, so, we get back, go up there. I'm on guard, man. I'm on heavy guard. We're back up in the apartment building, but I'm on guard. I'm staking out the hallway because I would do this in San Francisco. I do the same thing. I would stake out the hallway, walk around, go up on top of the building because something's going down, right? And the roof was a way of just kind of hiding, and then kind of somewhat controlling my environment. Well, anyways, next day, went through crap that night and stuff. And next day, I end up finally, I did another shot. Didn't need to do any. I didn't need to do any more, right? And but I took another hit, and it just sent me right back into freaking paranoid. That massive, terrible place. And I had to get out of there. And it's daytime, which is terrible when you're cranked out, right? Because the sunshine and people and normal, and you're not normal, and and everybody's looking at you. And I'm walking, and I end up walking up a couple blocks, and that's when I saw the stuff on the buildings. In my mind, everybody had been killed. You guys have been killed. I can't get a hold of nobody, and I'm just like, man, this is terrible, terrible feeling that you can't describe was just, on me. And then finally I got a hold of Dad. And then, and I told him, I remember a conversation, something, and then telling him, that somebody was following me. He knew it was up. He used to do speed, right? But he did show up, and he had baseball bat or whatever. And, and then he took one look at me and knew that I was tweaking. Right. And so, long story short, just to kind of cover this up, this is kind of war story stuff, but it was my situation of where I was at and a lot of the influences and the things, and it escalated in the wrong direction. Everything started falling apart. It was terrible. I couldn't get my act together. And no matter what I did, if I would open up the door to alcohol and I would drink or whatever, it just, I was just polluted. I was just polluted, man, and I couldn't get myself together. Circumstances being what they are, I was able to, get another chance, basically, and when I took it and, started, exercising, working out, reading, and I just wish, I always look back and wish, man, I wish I would have been introduced to something that would have caught me earlier, but this whole world opened up through reading, and stuff. And then of course, over the years, you kind of weed through things and figure stuff out and discard stuff and, kind of fine tune things and all that. And, I'm always kind of fine tuning things, but I love to read and learn. I like to be healthy. And so, and again, I completely give this to God for, even though I went down the road I went down, it could have been a lot worse. A lot more tragedy could have came about. For me or for other people. I was opened up and I was primed for just chaos, and no matter what I wanted, and I didn't want that. I did not want that. I wanted to be a normal person. Like I said, I would see people that had their apartment or had their place, and it's like, I just wanted that so bad, but it was inescapable. I was with the crank and just garbage and smut and just everything that was a part of that world. I was just sucked into it, and I couldn't get away, So when I was able to get away, then, I quit smoking cigarettes, and I was like 23 years old. And I just went down a different road. And so this is where I'm at right now. And, I know I threw a lot of stuff out there and it's just horrific stuff, but, there are lessons, and the only reason I'm even talking about this is I've always felt that, people have something to say, no matter, like with what you're saying, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got something to say, and there's something that somebody else can get that is valuable. And I know for me, looking back, the way I was when I was young and what I was needing wasn't met in a certain type of a way. And then I went gravitating in a direction that took me down the course that I ultimately went down. And it was destructive, and it caused me, and others a lot of problems and pain. But I've also, when I started reading the Bible and I became a Christian, it just grabbed me, and nothing's perfect. I'm not perfect. Every day's a struggle. But I know where I stand. I know, what I'll never do, and I know, the type of person that I want to be. And, and I just, I thank God for that, and I thank my family for that, because it's because of you guys giving me stability where a lot of people don't have that, they don't have that, and so there was always that with you guys. There was always your acceptance and love, and that is what is able to kind of pull me through and even have me right here, talking about any of this stuff. I mean, really, so
yeah. Cool. That's a great
That's about it, man. I know I kind of ran with some stuff.
No, it's all right. We'll definitely, we'll be back with other stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Love you, bro.
All right.
I'm proud of you.
Thanks.